Shivani.
Venkatachalanilayam Vaikunthapurvasam Venkatachalanilayam Vaikunthapurvasam Pankajanetam Paramapavitram Pankajanetam Paramapavitram Shankachakradhara Chinmayarupa Venkatachalanilayam Vaikunthapurvasam Pankajanetam Paramapavitram Shankachakradhara Chinmayarupa Venkatachalanilayam Hambujon Malaviruta Hambujon Malaviruta Maganita Guranamam Tumburu Narada Ganavilolam Tumburu Narada Ganavilolam Venkatachalanilayam Vaikunthapurvasam Pankajanetam Paramapavitram Shankachakradhara Chinmayarupa Venkatachalanilayam Makarakunnaladara Makarakunnaladara Madanagopalam Bhakta Poshakashi Purandhara Vitalam Bhakta Poshakashi Purandhara Vitalam Venkatachalanilayam Vaikunthapurvasam Pankajanetam Paramapavitram Shankachakradhara Chinmayarupa Venkatachalanilayam
Thank you, Shivani. Everybody knows Shivani, well-known trombone player, poet, artist, singer, and volleyball player.
Om Kalpatamritam Taptajivanam Kavivedikam Kalmashapam Shravanamangalam Srimadatam
We're kind of randomly picking chapter 37, the Master and Narendra. This is Sunday, March 1st, 1885. Sunday, March 1st, 1885. So that means that this is just, I think it was in April, when Thakur was diagnosed with the throat, when he first had the throat problem. They didn't know exactly that it was cancer in the beginning, but so this is towards the end of that first phase of the Dakshineshwar phase, and then afterwards, of course, we moved to Shambhapur and then Kasipur. So he's still in relatively good health at this time. Sri Ramakrishna was seated on the small couch in his room, absorbed in deep samadhi. Mohimacharan, Ram, Monamohan, Nobai Chaitanya, M, and other devotees were sitting on a mat spread on the floor. They were watching the master intently. Can you imagine what it's like to be sitting there and watching somebody in samadhi? It's a very, very rare thing. And actually, that would be, of course, and they all would have seen it so many times. These are all, it's an interesting group. Mahimacharam. Thakur liked all of these people. Not everybody liked them as much as he liked them. Because he was a little bit of, he thought of himself as a great pandit. And Thakur, he don't want to see flattered him or anything, but he kind of let him recite a few Sanskrit verses that he knew and would praise him and everything. He was very kind to him. And Ram, of course, was very close to Ramakrishna, Manamohan. So they're all there in the room. It was the day of the Dol Jatra, a Hindu religious festival. Sri Krishna and Radha are the central figures of this celebration, their images being placed on a swing, which is rocked now and then. A red powder is showered on the images. Later, friends and relatives throw the powder at one another. This festival is celebrated when winter passes into spring, on a full moon day, rendered doubly sacred by its association with the birth of Sri Chaitanya. It is a very big festival, especially in Kolkata. At Bellarmat is a very wonderful thing. Of course, everybody knows because of the throwing of the powder, it's obvious. But it is done in a very sacred way. It's not anything like what we know of kids on the street and with water and throwing things on everybody. With great devotion and love, people will even go to the president of the order and take a little bit of this colored powder and place it on his feet and bow down to him with great reverence. And everyone will go to the shrine and do all of that. It's very beautiful. And then there's always a lot of kirtan, because Chaitanya Deva, he was always associated, of course, with these kirtans. So it's a very wonderful celebration. All day long you'll hear singing and everything. And very much they'll be doing these kirtan around the temple and go into all of the different smaller temples to Holy Mother and Swamiji and Maharaj and everything. It's a very wonderful celebration. The devotee saw that the master was returning to consciousness of the world, though his mind still lingered in the realm of God vision. The master said to Mohimacharam, "My dear sir, please tell us something about love of God." Mohimacharan chanted the following line from the Narada Pancharatra. He's always chanting this. We don't know if he knew anything else. But whenever Thakur asks him, he'll chant these two lines. What need is there of penance if God is worshipped with love? What is the use of penance if God is not worshipped with love? What need is there of penance if God is seen within and without? What is the use of penance if God is not seen within and without? O Brahman, O my child, cease from practicing further penances. Hasten to Shankara, the ocean of heavenly wisdom. Obtain from him the love of God, the pure love praised by devotees, which snaps in twain the shackles that bind you to the world. Mahima said, once, while the great sage Narada was practicing austerities, he suddenly heard a heavenly voice repeating those lines. Master. Now, these are very special occasions. Thakur never came down from samadhi flat down to the regular, ordinary plane of consciousness. He'll always a little bit lingering, so he'll be in a little bit of ecstatic mood. So he'll always a little bit, always inspired, but a little bit more so. The master. There are two classes of devotees, Jiva Kotis, or ordinary men, and Ishvara Kotis, or divine messengers. The Jiva Koti's devotion to God is called Vaidhi, formal. That is, it conforms to scriptural laws. He worships God with a fixed number of articles, repeats God's holy name a specified number of times, and so on and so forth. This kind of devotion like the path of knowledge, leads to the knowledge of God and to samadhi. The jiva koti does not return from samadhi to the relative plane. Okay, this is a very big theme. Thakur talks about this so many times. This is a distinction that we don't find in traditional Vedanta. I don't know exactly if it's a Sankhya idea, I don't know exactly where it comes from. But Thakur has a very clear understanding of two different classes of people. These Ishvara Kotis will be those who have a special mission. They come when the avatar comes. They like the avatar. They're not born because of past karma. They're not born to work out their own salvation. They'll be nitya siddhas. They'll be ever perfect. And they'll have a greater spiritual capacity and spiritual power. This whole idea of who can come back from different spiritual states. There's a continuum. It's a question of degree. It's not so clear cut. Ishvara Koti, Jiva Koti. Because we'll see with Thakur has this theory of adhar. Adhar means a receptacle. And so even among Jiva Kotis there'll be a big distinction. That some are big receptacles, some are medium, some are small. Some individuals can handle a lot of spiritual exaltation, and others they'll be overwhelmed very easily. We see even among the direct disciples, who are all Ishvara Kotis, actually they're all Nitya Siddha. Thakur makes another distinction. He designates 6 as Ishvara Kotis. 5 direct disciples, monastic disciples, and then Purna. Sometimes in the beginning he includes a Bhavanat, but Purna. And but the others, he'll say, are also Nitya Siddha. They're all companions, these Parsadas, companions of the avatar. So and we can say even some of the householder disciples. Thakur is not very clear all of the time. He'll talk about these antarangas, his inner circle. And sometimes he'll say these antarangas that they'll have to be born again, they'll come back when he comes back. Say someone like M. M is not an ordinary person. It could be, these are all mystical things, mysterious things. It could be M was with him in the previous incarnation. We don't know anything about this. Thakur saw in vision one time that he thought that he saw M as a companion of Chaitanya Deva and Balaram, also 2 householder devotees. So it's not even just monastic and householder. But the point is that there's a certain capacity that everyone has to be able to absorb and contain these spiritual emotions and different levels and depths of meditation and concentration and samadhi. When he says return from samadhi, now we're talking about the highest level of nirvikalpa samadhi. Now, this is another debatable point. Can there be levels of nirvikalpa samadhi? If nirvikalpa samadhi means that there are no vrittis, then it should be absolute. Theoretically, there won't be degrees. If the mind is perfectly still, then there's not a single wave. There can't be any degrees of it. But we find, even with Ramakrishna, they'll talk about he went into a deep samadhi, or it took a long time for his mind to come down. So it seems that even within that, there are certain depths and different levels and everything. The Savikalpa Samadhi, the Ishvara Kotis and Jiva Kotis, ordinary people, can have this type of samadhi. So what Thakur says for ordinary people, and ordinary people means that they're not companions of the avatar. It doesn't mean they're ordinary people. Anybody gets close to samadhi is not an ordinary person. These are all great souls, very special souls. But he says for those who Jiva Koti, that means that they're born with some karma. They're born to work out their salvation. They're born to try to attain liberation. They may be very high stature. that they can experience different levels of samadhi, and a few different things can happen to them. One is that they can be pulled back down by some little desires or some past karma. So Thakur gives the example of the mongoose. He talks about good, yeah, good. He gives the example of these village boys that sometimes they'll catch a mongoose and they'll put it inside a little area that they'll make like a brick walls around it. The brick wall will be a certain height, and they'll take a brick and tie it to the tail of the mongoose, and the mongoose can climb all the way up to get to the top, ready to escape, and then gets a little higher so that it's lifting the brick, but the weight of the brick pulls it back down again. So, or for ordinary people, jivakotis, that when the mind is about to merge into the highest state of samadhi, which is very rare, of course, then a little bit of these past karma desires will come, pull the mind back down. But that will be enough for them to, even that much, to get to the roof and to see that divine presence. This is enough to be a jiva mukta. Maybe not Ishvara Koti, but to attain realization. So it doesn't mean that only these few special people can get liberation and can get knowledge living. This is Savikalpa Samadhi, they can easily get that. Then there's another class that they'll get to the roof and be tempted to stay up there or to jump over. Thakur gives the other example. That there are four friends walking down the road. There's a high wall on one side. They hear singing and dancing and joy and everyone having music and having fun. And one by one they climb up and they look over and they say, how wonderful, and they jump over. And the fourth one, he also feels that pull to jump over. But he says, no, let me go back and tell my friends about this. The great joy on the other side. So some will maintain a little desire to work for the welfare of others, and they can come back down from that state. The point is that if anyone stays on the roof too long, then there's no way to come back. Because there's no I at that time. There's no will. There's no mechanism by which one can come back unless some pull of karma or some desire is there, or Divine Mother is there. The Thakur was in that state for 6 months. And then he had to have the voice of the Divine Mother say, remain in Bhavamukha, and pull the mind down a little bit. So, this distinction will be really, even among Ishvara Kotis, there will be gradation. That no one was the same Adhar, the same huge receptacle as Swamiji was, that Thakur used to say. And among ordinary individuals, there will be others that he says that the spiritual emotion, for some it's like an elephant into a straw hut. Just destroy the whole thing. It's not only the samadhi. Thakur says also Mahabhava and Prema, these very high levels of emotion, the highest levels of devotional ecstasy, are too much for ordinary people to handle. The whole body will be shattered. Even Swamiji, when he went to Amarnath, the experience was so intense that really his health suffered, his heart suffered, and had a blood clot in his eye, all sorts of things happened. So this distinction is not so clear-cut, but we know that to enter into the highest state of nirvikalpa samadhi, generally this means that this is the way that one leaves this lifetime. One passes out of this life. It's a way to make that transition from this lifetime to the next. Because the body itself, one will be separate from the body at that point. There won't be any connection whatsoever. We have that example of the potter, and the potter's wheel, and the clay pot. That the potter will spin the wheel, and will form the pot into the clay into a pot, and as soon as it's formed, then he takes it off of the wheel and keeps it to the side and lets it dry in the sun. So this wheel is like the body. He doesn't spin it anymore. It'll just continue until it stops. Thakur says that's 21 days. That's how long it takes. He doesn't add anything more. But already the soul is completely separate from the body at that point. Makes no difference whatsoever. But as long as we have a little bit of our karma left, then we'll come back. We can come back from this state of samadhi if we don't get immersed in it too much. Thakur gives so many different examples. You see, even Shukadeva, who we consider to be one of the great saintly figures in the tradition. Thakur says, yes, it's questionable. Did he just see that ocean? Did he take a few drops of it? If he had bathed in that ocean completely, perhaps he couldn't have come back even. So, this nirvikalpa samadhi, we hear about it as if it's a common thing. It's not a common thing. It's very, very rare. Even among the direct disciples, we don't know how many of them had that nirvikalpa samadhi. We know that they were all God-realized souls. It's not that this is the only way. The Upanishadic tradition, Vedantic tradition, says that one can have enlightenment just in a flash, not necessarily by going into this meditative state and making the mind perfectly still. The Vedantic idea really is the mind is fully awake, the mind is fully functioning, and it flashes on us, yes, I am that. We realize our true nature. Devotee also can have that experience, that God vision and everything. Yes, there's one type of path of meditation where one enters into this state of nirvikalpa samadhi, which won't happen unless we're finished with our prarabdha. And from that state, this is the way one will transition to the next world. But it's Ramakrishna and these Swamiji and others, they could come back down from that state. So this is what he's saying. But the case of the Ishvara Koti is different. He follows the process of negation and affirmation. Okay. This, I think he uses the term analog here. That this means that passive negation is when we deny the identification with anything external to us. That we make a distinction between that which is real and that which is unreal. Sat asat. Sat asat vichara. With that which is eternal, non-eternal. That vastu, avastu, sat asat. We use it different terms. This nitya, anitya. And we distinguish ourselves that I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the senses. The witness of all of these, we make this big distinction. So this is a path of negation. Neti, not this, not this. And then, when they get to the roof, they get to the very top. Now, getting to the roof for the Jiva Koti means they've attained the goal. This is the highest knowledge. They've attained the goal, but they won't necessarily be able to return from that state. This will be when all their karma is gone. This is their time is up. This is the way they're leaving this world. But those who come back down, then it's affirmation that everything that they said was non-eternal. It was the avastu, all of these things are unreal. Now they see it all the same in manifest form. So this is that affirmation, first negation, then affirmation. This term, anulom bilom, it means that anulom is you're going with the grain, the hair actually. The loma, you look at the hair on your arm, and they'll all go in one direction, and then you go the other. So it's like swimming with the current and against the current. And going uphill and going back downhill again. So this is what the Ishvara Koti does. That means this affirmation, he can come back down again, and with a new vision, no longer making a distinction. Because now everything is real. We see this in the life of Swami Turiyananda, that whole life he practices the Brahma Satyam Devaditya, that this world is transitory, changing, not that ultimate reality. Brahman is the only reality. And then on his deathbed, he sees Brahma Satya Jagat Satya, that everything is real. Everything is a manifestation of Brahman. This can be followed as a spiritual practice also. They talk about this path of iti iti. The iti means not iti, not iti, not this, but this iti is a type of path where we try to start out the very beginning, more of a devotional path. Those who worshippers of Divine Mother especially try to start out by saying that everything is a manifestation of divinity. To see everything is glory of Mother. So rather than making that distinction that only Brahman alone is real and that this I am the witness, everything else is false and transitory. It's transitory, of course, but the source is that divine power, Divine Mother, the Shakti. So the case of the Ishvara Koti is different. He follows the process of negation and affirmation. First, he negates the world, realizing that it is not Brahman, but then he affirms the same world, seeing it as the manifestation of Brahman. To give an illustration, a man wanting to climb to the roof first negates the stairs as not being the roof. So he wants to get to the roof. He assumes that the roof is something different. He analyzes the stairs and says, no, that this is made of brick and lime and other things, concrete and everything. So he said, let me go to the next step. Climbs to the next step and said, no, this is also made of the same stuff. Until he gets all the way to the top of the roof, and then he finds out the roof is made of the same stuff. There's also the bricks and concrete and everything else. So a man wanting to climb to the roof first negates the stairs as not being the roof. But on reaching the roof, he finds that the stairs are made of the same materials as the roof, brick, lime, and brick dust. Then he can either move up and down the stairs or remain on the roof as he pleases. When Thakur heard the voice of the Divine Mother, remain in Bhavamukha. It means that he could go easily back and forth between these two states. The mind could merge into that high state of samadhi, or he could come back down and go far as chinmaya. Everything is made of pure consciousness, everything is divine. He could go back and forth. So the Bhavamukha is on the threshold of samadhi, but at the same time able to go back. So it's like a boat that goes from one side of the river to the other side. He could go back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. So that was that. He heard that on 3 different occasions. He heard this 3 different times. The last time was at the end of that 6-month period. Why he came down from samadhi, it was a combination. One, he heard the voice of the Divine Mother. Second was that he developed a very, very severe case of dysentery. And in that state, there's practically no awareness of the body at all, a slight bit. His mind would come down, there was one wandering monk would come, and he recognized Thakur in this state of samadhi. And by hitting his body, he could bring the mind down just enough so that if you put a little milk or something in his mouth, he could swallow it. This is how he stayed alive. Otherwise, he couldn't have survived for 6 months without any nourishment like that. So even in that state, a little bit the mind can come back down. It's like when we're sleeping, we have periods of deep sleep. And somebody can make a racket, we won't hear it. Other times it's not so deep. The slightest noise or a little disturbance, we can wake up a little drowsy, then fall back to sleep again. So even in that state of samadhi, 6 months, he wasn't in for 6 solid months in that highest state of nirvikalpa samadhi, because then he couldn't even swallow anything. He would have been gone. So the mind could come back down a little bit. And why did I start talking about this? So that Bhavamukha state, yeah. So a little bit of that awareness is there. so that the mind could come back down again. So the Nirvikalpa Samadhi state will also have that possibility of coming back down again for Sri Ramakrishna. This is how he spent his life. They say that after he heard the Bhavamukha, after the 6 months, most of the time he was in Samadhi. Most of the time. Because the devotees hadn't really come at that point. He was in Dakshineshwar, he had no duties or anything like that. There were others to look after him. And if he happened to be alone in his room or something, mind would immediately go up. So he used to have to fight to keep the mind on a little bit of a lower plane. It was like, the helium balloon. That as soon as you let go, it goes right up to the ceiling. So his mind was like that. So he developed little tricks, and then when the devotees started coming, then he really tried. And he would warn them that if you see the mind going up too fast, then repeat the name of Mother, or he gave them different tricks. He told the Holy Mother, when the Holy Mother first came, every night, she stayed and slept in the same room with him when she first came. And the whole night he would go into ecstasy. Sometimes he would be laughing and she wouldn't know what to do. Sometimes he would go into that Nirvikalpa Samadhi state. She would think he's dead. She wouldn't know what she would call out. And finally he realized she got no sleep at all. And then he said, you go and stay in the Nava. So that was the nature of his mind. And then he had different ways. He would coming down from Samadhi, he would ask for something to drink or give me something to eat. He would try to keep some little desire in his mind, keep the company of the devotees, because he knew he had a mission to fulfill in his life. And he used to say, I'd rather enjoy this divine ecstasy and joy in the presence of the devotees, the company of Bhakta and Bhakti. He wanted to live with the devotees and with devotion. And that meant keeping his mind down to a slightly lower plane. He used to like that Ram Prasad song that I don't want to become sugar, I want to eat sugar. Sinikete bhalobashi. So that was the nature of his mind. But if he wasn't careful, the mind would go directly up that way. There was one incident where they were singing several songs on Shiva. The ideal of Shiva is this samadhi. And he went into a very deep state of samadhi. And then took a long time for them to bring his mind back down. Sometimes they even rub his body and try to. When he passed away, they didn't know if he was dead or alive. They thought it was samadhi again, and they rubbed the ghee on his back and tried to bring the kundalini. Tried all sorts of different things. So after they brought his mind back down, he said, "Be very careful. These are dangerous songs for me." And sing some songs on the Divine Mother. That'll bring my mind down a little bit, because the ideal of the Divine Mother is seeing Mother everywhere. Ideal of Shiva is transcendent, infinite, absolute reality. So he could move up and down the stairs or remain on the roof as he pleases. This was half the time Thakur was talking about himself. This is how he knew all of these things. Shukadeva was absorbed in Samadhi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Jada Samadhi. Since Shuka was to recite the Bhagavata to King Parikshit, you all know that story, huh? That King Parikshit, what happened? He got cursed and got bit by a snake or something? Huh?
No,
And
he was about to get to by the 7 days.
yeah, so anyhow, he had 7 days to live.
No, he did. Ultimately, he got bit, no?
Anyhow, it doesn't matter. He had 7 days to live, and to pass those 7 days, they got Shukadeva to recite the Bhagavata, all those stories, and that's what we have as the Bhagavata. But that's the story behind the Bhagavata. So that was his task. He had to do that. So since Shuka was to recite the Bhagavata, not really reciting the Bhagavata, this is what comes to be known as the Bhagavata, what he recited to King Parikshit, because there was no Bhagavata before that. The Lord sent the sage Narada to him. Narada saw him seated like an inert thing, absolutely unconscious of the world around him. Thereupon, Narada sang 4 couplets on the beauty of a Hari, 4 very famous verses in the Bhagavad. to the accompaniment of the veena. While the first couplet was being sung, the hair on Shuka's body stood on end. Next, he shed tears, for he saw the form of God, the embodiment of spirit, within himself in his heart. Thus, Shukadeva saw the form of God even after Jada Samadhi. He was an Ishvara Koti. Hanuman, after having the vision of God, both with form and without, remained firmly devoted to the form of Rama, the embodiment of consciousness and bliss. So, what the Thakur says, how does the Ishvara Koti live in the world after this samadhi? They live in the world by adopting a certain type of ego. They have to have an ego sense. He calls this pakami, this ripe ego. And for the devotee, they have to go back to a relationship. They may adopt a relationship, think of themselves as a child of God, servant of God, in order to get to the roof. But coming back down again, they reassume that. So this is why Thakur always felt himself to be a child of the Divine Mother. That was the type of ego that he had. Without that ego, we can't live in the world. Without this ego, we can't act, we can't do anything, we won't look after ourselves. Everybody has an ego. In the case of these great souls, this is a perfectly ripe ego. I was reading this Swami Parmeshanand. I'm reading a very wonderful book, these tales from Sargachi. And he was telling his sevak, he said, no, you have to increase this ego. You'll have to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it embraces the entire world. That's not our small ego. That's not this ego that's filled with pride and its selfishness and all of that. It's a completely different ego. Ego simply means, who do I think I am? What's my sense of I? And if the sense of I embraces the whole world, the sense of I is universal, or the sense of I is in one of the relationships, child of God, servant of God, then it's the way that these God-realized souls can live in the world. The Jivan Muktas, they have to have a sense of I. So this allows them to realize God, it allows them to live in the world. So we adopt a ripe ego in order to really ripen the ego. At first it's superimposition, aropkara. At first we do little play acting. I actually think I'm the body. I actually think my parents are my parents. But I keep telling myself, I'm a child of the Divine Mother. Or I say, Thakur is my father, Holy Mother is my mother. I keep telling myself that. I beat that into my skull till that's the way I really think and everything. This will take me higher and higher. And then afterwards I realize, yes, that everything before was because I identified with the body. Now I know I'm pure spirit and part of that divine reality. So now I see the truth of it. The Jnani does the same thing. When Jnani says, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. At the beginning, when I say I, I'm thinking of myself as an individual. How I, this individual, can be one with the Brahman. But after God realization, it's a whole different thing. Then I know this I doesn't exist. The Brahman alone exists. So that attitude first is to help me realize it. But then afterwards, then I live with this, the eye of knowledge. We have the two types of ripe ego. There's the eye of knowledge, there's eye of devotion. He said, Thakur says, Shankaracharya lived in the world with this ego of knowledge. So I am Brahman. I am one with the highest reality. This is also an ego. It's an I sense, but don't confuse it with our ego. It's not an ego in the sense of pride. It's just, this is the nature of our self-identification. How do we identify ourselves? Who do we feel we really are? If it's tied in with the body and the mind and the personality and all of our little likes and dislikes and everything, then it's a source of bondage. If it's this I is connected with the divine, then it's a source of liberation for us. It's the greatest help for us, this ego, the strong type of ego. Prahlada sometimes realized I am he. Sometimes he felt that he was the servant of God. So these are two attitudes that can exist within the same person. It's not that everybody is just a jnani or everybody is just a bhakta. We see with Hanuman how he had those three attitudes. Sometimes he felt a servant of God, sometimes a part of God, sometimes one. He and Rama were one. So we can have different attitudes at different times. You may remember he asked M once, what is your attitude? And I said, sometimes I like this idea of the infinite absolute reality. Sometimes I like to think that servant of God, child of God. But Thakur says, very good. We can have different attitudes at different times. When we sit for meditation, we may say, no, I want to forget this body. I want to realize that this just pure spirit. Then when we work, we can think, no. Take the attitude of a servant of God. Then when we're sick, let me be a child of God. Your mother, come look after me, do whatever you like. Of course, we should try to integrate everything. Not that we're jumping from one thing to another. We have to have this nishtha, one devotional path, but it doesn't mean that we're limited and one-sided. So Prahlada sometimes realized, I am he. Sometimes he felt that he was the servant of God. How can such a person live without love of God? That is why he must accept the relationship of master and servant, feeling that God is the master and himself the servant. Don't think of this, the servant is someone who thinks, oh, the master told me to do it, I have to do it. This is not that type of servant. This is really someone who has that tremendous love. That Hanuman had such love and devotion for Rama that he couldn't think of anything for himself. That the only thought in his mind was, how can I serve Rama? So this relationship, it completely gets rid of any selfish motive for anything. These relationships are different, and it depends on our personality. That the servant relationship, dasya bhava, this requires a tremendous amount of self-effort and self-will. People say that, oh, we have no free will, everything is God's will. That's not the attitude of the servant. Attitude of the servant is everything is God's desire. I want to do everything to please God, but I'm the servant. I have tremendous power. That Rama is my master. I can do anything in the name of Rama. So people who have that type of tremendous willpower and strength, and Thakur liked that attitude, that we have to have this tremendous grit and determination. Kubrokchai, he used to say. We have to have that grit, and we have to really put forth. Swamiji loved that, Purushakara, that use your own strength. But there'll be others who naturally like to feel, no, I lie in the lap of Mother. Everything is her will. Let her inspire me to do it. So they'll take a different attitude, that's all. There's a little bit of a question of what type of personality we have. That is why he must accept the relationship of master and servant, feeling that God is the master and himself the servant. This enables him to enjoy the bliss of Hari. In this attitude, he feels that God is the bliss and he himself is the enjoyer. The ego of devotion, the ego of knowledge, and the ego of a child do not harm the devotee. Now, we have three different things here. There are really two things. This ego of knowledge will be for the jnani. For the bhakta, there'll be all of the other possibilities. This ego of devotion can take the form of the ego of a child, or it can take the form of the ego of the servant, or of the friend, or of the lover, any of the relationships. They all fall within this ego of devotion. The ego of knowledge is a little bit different. There's no personal God involved. It's all this infinite absolute Brahman. So the ego of devotion, the ego of knowledge, the ego of a child do not harm the devotee. Shankaracharya kept the ego of knowledge. The ego of a child is not attached to anything. The child is beyond the three gunas. Now, when we practice these things, again, this idea of arup kora, Thakur uses the term over and over again. It's a type of role playing that we have to really feel that just as the child longs for the mother. Huh? If you ever go into a shopping mall or something and you happen to see that the small child has been separated from the mother, has lost the mother, and the child is screaming for the mother. Huh? That we try to adopt that attitude. We superimpose it. We integrate it. We as I say, role playing. We try to feel that way. That when I call on mother, I try to feel like a child who's can't find his mother. Yeah? If we like this mother bhava, we try to feel like we're Radha who is stuck at home, longing to go and see Krishna. We have to adopt this particular attitude. Asura kota habe. Thakur says this is we rely on this. This becomes the ground of our spiritual practice. These relationships, they're very, very important. That if we take this relationship, servant relationship, in our tradition, all of the monks of the order, we feel that we're like foot soldiers and the Swamiji's the general, foot soldiers in Thakur's army. Huh? And we do whatever we're told to do, and we do it just out of love for Thakur and Mother and all the indirect disciples. Very natural for that, but at the same time we can adopt any of these other attitudes. Yeah. As I say, when we're not feeling well, when struggles come, we've done everything we can, we don't know what to do, then we just say, Mother, do everything for me. We take that attitude. So Thakur liked this attitude of a child. He used to say they're very safe. This attitude of the lover, of course, all of these erotic ideas come in that whole tradition has gotten a little bit spoiled through the years. But he said this Shontan Bhav, the attitude of a child to mother, very pure. That the dependence and love the child has for the mother is so pure, and also the love that the mother has for the child, perfectly selfless. Mother doesn't expect anything in return. The small, the infinite, perfectly helpless. All she wants to do is love the child and look after the child. So we look upon God that way. The child is beyond the three gunas. He is not under the control of any of them. One moment you find him angry, the next moment it is all over. One moment you see him building his playhouse, the next moment he forgets all about it. Now you see him love his playmates, but if they are out of his sight a few days, he forgets all about them. A child is not under the control of any of the gunas, sattva, or rajas, or tamas. Of course, those of you who have children know that they're not always perfect. Huh? He's talking about it at a certain period and a certain age, and certain qualities that the children have, this non-attachment and this freedom and innocence. There's tremendous innocence with the children. The bhakta feels, O God, thou art the Lord, and I am thy devotee. This I is the ego of bhakti. Now, this is, again, this ripe ego, it's not really a ripe ego. This is a bhava. This is an attitude. When he says that the bhakta, he means somebody following this path of devotion. He doesn't mean this God-realized person. They'll have the same ego afterwards, but now this is the aid for them. That we try to feel that. Thou art the Lord, and I am thy devotee. This I is the ego of bhakti. Why does such a lover of God retain the ego of devotion? There is a reason. The ego cannot be got rid of, so let the rascal remain as the servant of God, the devotee of God. This is another great teaching of Sri Ramakrishna. He was so practical. He would say, if you analyze, look for this I. What is the source of it? You really just close your eyes in meditation and look deep into this I, this consciousness, this awareness. Where's the I in it? Where is there anything personal in it? It's reflecting whatever comes into the mind. just like a mirror, reflecting everything that comes before it. What does the mirror add to it? Does the mirror have any personality? Everything is external to it. There's an I, it's just an idea, what we think of ourselves. We analyze, we realize that there's no substance to it. It's just an idea. He said the very next moment it comes back. He says you can analyze 1,000 times and realize the hollowness, the emptiness of Vastu, the emptiness of this ego. But it comes back. That means that the idea comes back. It doesn't have any absolute reality, but the idea comes back. We have examples of things that have a phenomenal reality, but no objective reality. Take the example of the line of the horizon. We see it, but is it a real thing? Is there a line anywhere? Can you go and find it? You're out at sea and you look there and you see where that line where the water meets the sky. This is the horizon. But what is it? It's just an appearance. You can't, you go there and it's just as far away as it was before. There's nothing there. But we can't get rid of the idea. Every time we look, we see it. It won't disappear for us. So he says, then utilize it. We're utilizing something that's not absolutely real, but for the time being is real. In fact, it seems more real than anything else. I know that I exist. I know that I'm so-and-so. I know that I was born in a certain place at a certain time. I'm a certain age. I have certain qualities, characteristics. I know that. You can't convince me otherwise. Someone say, oh, but really you're the witness of that. Yeah, if you say that, philosophically I understand that this the truth of that. But then as soon as somebody says something, then we react. Somebody says, oh really, you understand that? I don't think you're that smart. I said, what? How dare you say that to me? So the ego comes back. So Thakur very practically, he said, then utilize it. If it won't disappear, then utilize it. Turn it into the servant of God. Or child, any of the attitudes. Child of God, friend of God, any of these. Takshala, he says. Let that rascal, let it stay. If it doesn't want to leave, let it stay. And let it be your friend. You may reason, here it is, you may reason 1,000 times, but you cannot get rid of the ego. The ego is like a pitcher, and Brahman like the ocean, an infinite expanse of water on all sides. The pitcher is set in this ocean. The water is both inside and out. The water is everywhere. Yet the pitcher remains. Is the water separate from the ocean? The pitcher gives the appearance. It makes us feel that there's water inside that's separate from the water outside. If you lift it out, then it's separate. When it's there, the pitcher is not doing anything. It's not holding the water really. There's some water, as we say, is inside, some is outside. Usually they give the example of space. That we can understand even better. We have a glass. Is the space inside the glass separate from the space outside the glass? If we move the glass, we move the space inside. Space is infinite. The glass is moving through space. But because of the glass, because that means body, mind, senses, we think that there's something special about that interior thing, and we call it I. This is what Thakur was saying. Now this picture is the ego of the devotee. That means if we take it in that sense, that I know that I'm a part of the ocean. I'm not some separate individual, I'm part of the ocean. And each section of the ocean, little portion of water, will have tremendous devotion and respect and regard for the entire ocean. How powerful, how wonderful it is, the source of my whole being. I won't exist without it. That'll be the devotee's attitude. Now this picture is the ego of the devotee. As long as the ego remains, you and I remain. And there also remains the feeling, O God, thou art the Lord, and I am thy devotee. Thou art the master, and I am thy servant. Thakur gives the other illustration. The ego is like a stick on water. That if we take an aerial view and we look down, we see that stick, or say a swimming pool, you know, they'll divide child side from the adult side, and they'll have a rope strung across it. If you look from up above, you won't be able to tell that is it something that really goes down and separates one side from the other. But if you go up and you see, no, it's just lying on the surface. There is no really one side and the other side. It's just making some demarcation so that we feel that one side is different, the other side is different. One is shallow and the other is deep, that's all. But, so it's separating something which never gets separated. And this ego works in two ways. It makes us feel each one of us is separate from everybody else. We don't feel that oneness with everyone. And we feel separation from God. So it works in these two different ways. As long as the ego remains, you and I remain, and there also remains the feeling, O God, thou art the Lord, and I am thy devotee. This feeling of separation from God doesn't have to be a negative or an absolute thing. This separation, it means that there's some distinction and difference. We can still feel we're one, that we belong to God. The God is the source of our life and everything. We can have that relationship. Thou art the master, and I am thy servant. You may reason a million times. You see, before he said 1,000 times, now he says a million times. A million times, but you cannot get rid of it. But it is different if there is no picture. Okay, now, Thakur gives another illustration of the people who go to draw water from the reservoir. Huh? One will take a pitcher, one will take a bucket, one will take a sack, something like that. They'll take it, they'll give it a different name, it'll take a different form and all of that. This is the way we access the water. The other way is we dive in. We don't use the pitcher at all, we simply dive in. Thakur, remember he asked, not in Swamiji one time, imagine that you're a fly, and there's a big cup with syrup, and you want to drink the syrup. How will you do it? And Swamiji says that I'll land on the edge, the rim, and I'll lean over and I'll drink from there. And Thakur says, why? He says, otherwise if I fall in, I'll drown in it. And Thakur laughed at him. And he said, no, Baba, nobody can drown in this ocean of nectar. Is Amrita. One becomes immortal. So we have these two options. We keep the sense of I, we have a relationship, and we enjoy that relationship, or we simply dive in. That means that forget about this ego, let this ego merge into that infinite absolute Brahman. That's the path of knowledge. It's not very easy. Narendra entered the room. Finally, we're getting Narendra in this chapter. We haven't seen him at all. Narendra entered the room and saluted the master. They began to talk together. Presently, the master came down from the couch and sat on the floor on which a mat had been spread. In the meantime, the room had become filled with people, both devotees and visitors. So this is a Sunday, so many people will come. This is really the height of Thakur's popularity, you can say. That now the word was out. That before he was really a kind of hidden gem, and now everybody came to him. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. Anybody have any questions or anything to add? We stop at 8, huh?
No, it's up to you.
Yeah, I'm happy if anybody wants to ask anything. We can stop the reading now. If anybody wants to. Vedika? Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Vedika, I knew her when she was tiny. She used to come with her older brother and her parents to the center almost every Saturday, huh? And she would run in and she would jump on me and jump on my lap. And now she's a big college student. Yeah. So we're very proud of her. Yeah. That was a different thing. Okay. When Thakur fell and broke his arm, this was a different time. He was walking along the path that had a railing there, and somehow he was thinking of there's a Jagannath Puri. There's a tradition that people want to embrace the image. I don't know if they really do it, or but there's some tradition like that. And he was in this bhava. Now there's a type of samadhi they call bhava samadhi. This is a little bit different. This isn't with all the vrittis are stopped or anything. It means the mind ascends to some divine realm. We don't know how, but so he's completely unconscious of the world, of his body or anything, and he fell and he broke his arm. And then he said later that it was as if the Divine Mother were telling me that now let your mind remain on this nada lila. That means that don't see God just in the state of ecstasy. See God dwelling within all beings. And he said that Vaishnav Charan used to say that. He always quoted this Vaishnav Charan. He used to say that his highest state comes when one realizes and sees God in all different beings. He called it this Nara Lila. He said there's Deva Lila, Nara Lila, all different types of Lilas, this divine play of God, dwelling within human being. So Thakur used this term in two different ways. One, for the avatar. This is one type of Nara Lila, God coming in human form. But the other is just with eyes open to see God dwelling within all living beings. And this actually, we see in his lifetime that this became more and more his mood, especially in Kashipur. That everyone was, he said, I see Rama and old men and Sita and old women. That I see God alone is there, Divine Mother alone is there. Very beautiful scene. Latu was sitting like this. He said, you see Latu? He's there resting his chin on his hand. I see Rama alone is resting his chin on his hand. So this is that Nara Lila. And he said that this change in his attitude came after he broke his arm. He said he felt it divine. Not that she said anything. She didn't say anything, but he felt as if this was the intention, that she was telling him that now try to see God with eyes open, not always going to some ecstatic state. Not that he had his samadhis and everything also after that, but that mood became very much predominant with him, seeing God within all living beings.
We listen to Gita almost every weekend. But with the devotee could not remove the I. I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Suggest how to remove that I.
No, don't remove it. There's a whole point. We can't remove it. And those who do it, it sounds very, very phony. We have people say, oh, this person is devotee. No, Thakur says very clearly, let that rascal remain. Don't remove it. But let it remain as the servant of God, as a child of God. Transform it into a relationship with God. Remove that ego which is identified with the body and the mind. Remove that. Even it can be identified with the mind and the body, but let's say that the body is only for the purpose of serving God. Mind is only for that purpose. So we just change our attitude, and if we say that whatever I do is an offering, that's an I, that's an ego. So we want to strengthen it. We want to utilize it. Let this whole life be lived as an offering. Who's going to offer it? I'm going to do it. Until I realize, until this I melts away. But this is a whole point that Thakur is making, that this feeling of I will somehow remain in one form or another. So let it remain in the form that will be helpful to us. This ego can be our best friend and our worst enemy. There's the ego that's always wanting to fulfill desires and satisfy itself, to defeat other people, to show its superiority. This is what keeps us in bondage. That the ego which wants to serve other people, that ego which is unselfish, that ego which wants to do everything as an offering. That is the greatest help in spiritual life. We want to increase that and strengthen that ego. A very strong sense of I. Bhakti. It's got to go bigger and bigger and bigger until it embraces the whole world. So we need a very strong, a very centered, grounded type of of the ego in life in general, but in spiritual life especially. It won't help to have a very fragile type of ego that's always getting hurt and always looking after itself and trying to satisfy each and every little desire. That'll kill us, that type of ego. We need a very strong type of ego that says my strength comes from the strength of the master. So that'll be of great benefit to us and to everyone, that type of ego. But it's tricky, because selfishness creeps in, and this desire for praise and all of these things, they creep in. So we have to be very vigilant with this type of attitude.
Yeah, I mean, trying to glorify God, people sometimes end up glorifying themselves.
Yeah, of course. We all do these things.
So you feel comfortable driving so far?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, then we'll close. Om Niranjanam Nityam